morning, everyone. We'll call our special call meeting of the Jackson City Council, June 20th, 2017 to order. If you would please rise for the invocation and pledge. Father, we humbly come before you this morning just thanking you for loving us as imperfect as we are. And Father, we know when that time of perfection will come. Father, we're here to proclaim you as our Lord, our God, and our King, and to acknowledge your divine sovereignty in our lives. Father, we thank you for the city. We thank you for all the many, many ways that you've blessed it, Father, and we thank you for our council. Father, your word says that this council is ordained by you for the service to your people that live in this city. So, Father, we pray for strength, for wisdom, for discernment for them as we take care of the business that falls within this city. We just pray that as we meet, that everything we say, everything we'll do will bring honor and glory to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Anita, I think we have all council members present with the exception of Councilman Dodd, and we're hopeful that he will be here shortly. Item 4 is the invitation for public comment. I'll encourage any of you that have, any of you that have any comments under any item under new business, which we have 2 items of business this morning, please let me know. We have item 6 is our first readings. First is consideration of ordinance, the 2017-2018 fiscal year operating and capital budget. And at this point, we'll turn it over to our city recorder, Mr. Al.
Well, I'll kind of pass it to Randy. Did you want to say anything about the budget committee and the work that was done?
Just very briefly, the Budget Committee, of course, been meeting since January, reviewing the budget. We have reviewed the budget. We didn't make a formal recommendation to approve the budget you have before you. I think there's still some concern from a couple of members of us having a quote unbalanced budget, but of course we're hoping to have the revenues to cover that before the year's up. So, but we have reviewed the budget and don't have any major objections to anything.
Okay.
Thank you.
Morning, Mayor and Council.
Morning.
Today we're here, as the mayor already introduced, to a special call meeting. Just supposed to show the record will show we did put a public notice in with the complete budget, not just the general fund, and the tax rate as shown here, and it was put in about 15 to 18 days before today, so it was well beyond the 10-day requirement. And we want to start out by, well, first off, I asked that everybody get a booklet, a binder, their budget in it. And secondly, did you receive from Ms. Bell a list of, we normally start this list at the meeting, but going into the meeting, thanks to the Budget Committee and I think Councilman Conger was the one who asked some questions that caused us to make some inquiries, and we've actually come up with a very significant number that's going to be reducing our out of balance or our shortfall, and it is, this is very hard to read here, but $512,446. So as we go through here, I'll be pointing out and referencing back to this sheet if you want to keep that out in front of you. But this is the budget ordinance that we are presenting to you that was in the public notice. We're talking about $68,118,000 worth of revenue and the same amount in expense. But that does include, that $68 million in revenue does include a $2.5 million draw on fund balance. In other words, a shortfall. And you can see that on your revenue sheet. anytime I'm going too fast, moving around, just stop me. I may not have the same order that you have in your booklet, but you can see that we have a $2.5 million, $2,510,000 draw on fund balance. That has now been reduced to $1.9 million by that $512,000 credit to some overstatement of expenses. But we'll go on here and we can ask questions. You can ask questions accordingly. The intent of my upfront presentation here is just to give an overview of basically where we're at and try and set the stage for whatever questions you might want to ask. Let's see if I get the paperwork out here. I don't know exactly what order you have in your booklets, but I do want to take you through the most important part of our revenue, which is, of course, the property tax. And you should have a sheet like this. It may not be in the exact order, but I'm sure you can find that because it's labeled property tax budget. And the reason I want to dwell on this one, because this is 40-some% of our revenue. And as you can see that we have an increase this year of $863,000. But unfortunately, residential has not increased 1.61%, commercial and industrial 1.32%, and then this is the Industrial Development Board. Again, if I'm going too fast or if I have it out of order too much, you can correct me. We also had a $346,000 increase. That was our largest real increase. That was in personal equipment, which is basically what you see in your retail stores and et cetera out on Van Drive area and the Columns area, all the construction that you see going on out there, and manufacturing companies like Kellogg's and others who have added to their equipment lines. But this $853,000, point that I want to make about that $853,000 is that that disappears very rapidly. And again, if I've got the wrong order here, this is the debt service, which is the second most important thing, I guess you'd say, of where we stand. And I'd like to flip over here to the last line, last column, excuse me. And that shows that a year ago at this time, we were at $8.5 million between principal and interest. We are now at $9.6 million. So right there is a $1.1 million increase in expense that completely overshadows and wipes out the $863,000 increase in property tax. So that really is the name of the game for us. A couple years here, we're at 9.6, and then we go to 10.2. Our hope and what we're relying on is that in 2019, the 10 years is up on our refunding. This $58 million refunding that we're now working off since 2009, as you can see, is about 70% of our total combined principal and interest. So this is where we're really getting hit hard. And in 2019, if the market conditions are right, we can not only go in and refinance this, which is now at a fixed 3.75% interest, hopefully get a better interest rate, but the main thing is we could push the remaining 5 years out another 5 years if the council so decides, and I know there's some negative feelings about doing that. What did I do? I don't have anything about Dell. Need a little help from Marcus.
The Calvary's on his way.
He's on the way, okay. The most valuable player right now. Okay? All right, gotcha. So what I'm saying is, for this year, we completely wipe out the increase in property tax revenues by going from the 8.5 to the 9.6. We stay there for 2 years, and then there's another increase, another bump, but hopefully that can be offset by refinancing the 2000 and, well, it was the 2009 refunding we did on $58 million worth of bonds.
Now, which fiscal year you're saying 2019? Is that the 2018-19 year or the 2019-20 year we could?
That is the 2019-20 year.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Okay, so we talked about that, revenues and the main expense, and try and put it in perspective here with a little pie chart. See if I can get this down to where I can make my point. Okay, in total, and remember, we had to go back and change our policy on debt service to allow us to go up to this percent. It was at 23% is where we had it capped. But even though we're going up about 1.3 million between property tax increase and taxes, payment in lieu of property tax, which we rely mainly on JEA, we're going up about 1.3 million from here to here, but there's only about 300,000 that is in the white area for the general fund, which is all of our operations departments to spend, because the rest of it is going to debt service, which I've already explained in that $1.1 million increase. So if you went back to about 2012, you would see that this number here, which is now 75% going to the general fund, and all of our support operations was at 80%. And that's why we were able to do so much more with less. Now, what we did for this year's budget, we asked the departments to go back to 2016 to those levels and submit a budget accordingly. Some departments were able to, if they were smaller departments and basically had some areas in maintenance and fuel, etc., they were able to go back. Other departments that were very heavy laden with personnel, which is mainly police and fire, they were not able to, and understandably why. For example, on police, you've got step increases going on all the way and all along, I should say. And we finally, I think Chief Weiser brought on 20-some recruits and are maybe close to being to the personnel level we should be. Is that true or not?
We need about 10 more.
10 more, okay. Well, Chief Weiser will be speaking to that as we go, but what I'm saying is, in the previous years, we might have operated at a shortfall of maybe 25 to 30 officers, and that caused our overtime to go up. But Chief Weiser's done a great job in bringing that overtime down with the way he's worked his shifts. But that's where we see an increase when we get into the detail, on here, it's still able to show a decrease. And we have an increase in police grants, which of course is a positive. That's not anything to worry about. So this is the ordinance that we're presenting to you. I want to show you, and this is not the one that you're going to be asked to approve, but just so we can get a better view of what that $512,000 does. It brings the, for example, on administration, where we had a 7% increase, since most of that came out of the mayor's department and the IS, it brings that down to a 2% increase. And where we already had a 5.28% decrease in general government, we took out $100,000 out of the city hall building. That was able to bring us up even better to a minus 5.76. And then when we get down to other public safety, and Lenanda can address this, where we had shown before a 22% increase, we were able to take out, or she was able to take out $253,000, and that brings that down to a more reasonable 6.95% increase. So we can't ask you to approve this yet because hopefully there will be more changes made on the sheet that I referenced here. Again, keep this on your left hand or something as we go through. Going back to the ordinance, are there any questions up to this point? I don't want to gloss over anything, but the main story is that our streams of revenue are not sufficient to cover initially the debt service jump for this year. The monies that we borrowed, we're only paying 1.86% now. That's up in the last 6 to 8 months as the Fed has made changes and other interest rates follow along with that. Ours is based on something called the SIFMA, and 1.86 may sound high compared to the 1% that I may have been coming to you last year at this time, when the Fed rate was basically 0 at that time, and now it's 0.75 to 1, varies in between there. So where we're at, if you want to ask any questions about revenue, I believe that's the second page of the ordinance. And let me just make some brief comments therein. On our revenues, if you look at, and this is going to be a little bit misleading because we showed property tax going up, and yet here we're showing very little. We were showing it going up 2.8%, and here we're showing just the 0.28%, and even some going down on the old property tax, and that's what's over at Chancery. And the reason that it's going down is because we're collecting more on the front end. And then we have tax penalties also going down as we collect it faster than we have in previous times. And then we have tax equivalents going up only almost 1%, when it should have gone up much further. But due to this increase in the pie chart that allocates more to debt service, these numbers do not reflect what you would think that you would see. But if you take property tax, which includes current property tax, old property tax, tax penalties, tax equivalents, we're talking about 44% of our total revenue. If you take sales tax, that's another 23% of our revenue, and I did not factor in anything as far as a projected outcome of the lawsuit and the decision that the council made several weeks ago to rescind the 1989/2001 resolution. So I did not anticipate anything there, just a normal growth in sales tax. But if you take sales tax plus property tax, and then you drop down here to all the state reimbursed taxes, which amounts to about 16%. In total, you're talking 81% of our revenues are involved in either property tax, sales tax, or reimbursements from the state.
Al, how did you use the property taxes from the 2 TIF districts or 3 TIF districts? Are they factored in this percentage of growth anywhere?
Well, it's all in the percentage of growth, yes.
Okay.
But then you'll see on the expense side where we're giving about $300,000 a year to exit 85 TIF. And Stan, what was your number? About 150,000 going to the CRA District
So
1.
roughly $500,000.
$500,000.
Okay.
That's a good point. I don't know if anything else might strike out that you'd want, stand out that you'd want to ask me about. Basically, one thing is that in previous years, we've had a transfer to H&S of the overheads that were involved in the mayor's department, Karen's and mine, Susan's, et cetera, supporting health and sanitation and the sportsplex. But now we're doing it in a different matter, so ATA does not allow us to budget for that. That's why it shows a $700,000 shortfall. That will still be happening on an ongoing month-to-month basis, but we can't really budget for it. It's in the due tos and due froms. Any questions on the revenues as such? One thing I do need to mention is that on the hall income tax here, state income tax, that's being phased out over a 5-year period. So I reduced that about 20%, as you can see. And then, and the mayor might shed more light on this than I can, but on the gas tax, the increase that Governor Haslam has put in place, I added about $200,000 for this year, which basically offsets the hall income tax decrease. And Mayor, you had a projection, I think, over 5 years of what you thought that might be.
Yeah, probably going to end up about 800,000 over per year, but it's, you factor all the revenue we give up versus what we get, it's about a break-even basis.
So I did not try to overstate that since that's been unknown at this point.
Al, I had two questions on the revenue. One of them
Yes.
was on the hotel motel tax.
Yes,
Last year, year-to-date, we collected $258,000. We're budgeting $610,000 for the year.
that's right, and that's a good point too. The Sportsplex, their 10-year interlocal agreement was up, where we were getting everything over the cap of $975,000 was going to the Sportsplex. So that limited the city and the county to $390,000 previously in the perfect world. Okay, sometimes it was greater if sales tax came in, hotel motel tax came in greater. Now that's been reduced to where each, the city and the county are both gonna get the first $610,000. And then whatever's left, which is gonna be around 2 to 3%, is gonna go to the Sportsplex. So instead of the Sportsplex getting $800,000 a year, that's rolling back to the city and the county, and the CEDC is not even involved in this at all. They're getting their straight percentage right off the top.
Okay.
That's why this is going up
Okay.
to $610,000.
Okay,
And it may be greater for the Sportsplex than what I said, because for whatever reason, hotel motel tax continues to increase. This year, it's gonna be up again.
All right, the other question I had was on the state excise tax.
Right.
We've received $221,000 year-to-date. We're only budgeted $171,000.
And that's something that's very difficult to project. Back in March and April, when we put this together, we had not received a second or third payment on excise tax. So if anything, and there's very little fluff in here, but that would be one fluff area where we should receive more than I've got budgeted.
Okay, well, I guess, does that fluctuate drastically from year to year, what we receive?
Well, it's based on, obviously, the business performance levels and our population in percentage to other municipalities. Yes, it does fluctuate.
Okay. Okay, that was the only two questions I had, Reverend. Thank you.
Al, I have two questions.
Yes.
In our discussion on the changing the city stickers over to having them in location in one location, we estimated a little more than that 100,000. You feel that's a very conservative number for that revenue increase?
Yes. And again, I did not try and be overly positive on that because we're working with Fred Birmingham. Karen has done a wonderful job setting up the relationship there, but there are so many exceptions. What we're trying to do, though, is make it a situation where they simply, they're going to be doing all the collection. And instead of them simply asking you as a city resident, do you want to pay your city sticker here or do you want to go across the street? It's going to be mandatory that they pay it there at that time. It's going to come out on the notice, and it'll show a $15 to $25 misdemeanor fine if you do not pay it. And we probably will ask Chief Weiser to do some more inspections on the street, which is difficult to do. But we're going to be trying to collect much more than what I've shown here, yes. Good point.
And then there's a loss of a little over 200,000 in federal grants. What grants are we losing? It's a pretty steep reduction from the previous year.
I'd have to ask Chief Weiser here. I think that his grants fall under federal and state.
That's your grants?
Well, I don't know if they're all my
Okay.
grants or not. I know,
No, that's,
I know all the grid grant that you approved, we did lose. The only thing that they're funding in that is the special game prosecutor.
Okay.
Where, they had some other initiatives that they were funding, but it's only a 3-year grant. There's another, grant that ran out at Safe Hobson that covered the salary, and that grant position ran out. We put that position on our city budget.
Okay, thank you.
anything else on revenue? Again, just remember that it's 81% if you take all the so-called taxes, sales tax, property tax, payment in lieu of tax, and state recovery tax. Together, that's 81% of the revenue, so we're very heavily dependent upon that, along with some items like the business tax, which is somewhat controversial since we've turned that over to the state. We are showing an increase there on business tax. It's basically a break even, I'm sorry. It's hard for us now that we don't handle the companies ourselves. We don't see those tax filings, and we're more at the mercy of the state. Last month was the big month. It was the Class 4 business tax receipts, and I think it was like 818,000. So we could see some improvement there as our businesses and retail increases out in the Collins area, et cetera. But the hotel motel tax, Randy, is a definite plus. That will happen because we've changed the percentage, the cap. We've increased it from 975 to like 1,375,000. So the Sportsplex will be receiving less, and city and county and CEDC will all be receiving more. And what we signed with the county was just a 3-year agreement, so that can be revisited, hopefully will be revisited for the Sportsplex benefit, but We appreciate what John Newman and his crew as the leadership of the oversight, Sportsplex Oversight Committee has done there. Because technically, we could have came out with 0, we being the Sportsplex. Okay. Now we'll get into the areas of expense, and I'm going to qualify and generalize here in some respects. First off, I want everybody to understand that the percentage changes that you see over here on the far right basically compare the FY18 budget to the FY17 amended budget. So when you get down to areas where we have utilized the overhead, and purchasing and personnel would be a couple of those, you can see that the increase might show 27% here on purchasing, but that's because the original budget, which is the real world, was reduced down to 122,000, and we're comparing almost apples to oranges here, because that's the money that went to health and sanitation and the Sportsplex, because they truly can't stand on their own. They don't have a personnel department, they don't have a purchasing department, and we are allowed by state rules to allocate some expenses accordingly. So you see the 27% on purchasing and on personnel, you see a 69%. Those are fictitious numbers, and we can have Susan and Lynn come up and explain it, but hopefully what I'm trying to tell you is you really have to look at, even though the spreadsheet doesn't show it, you have to look at FY18 budget for personnel being 282, and the original budget of FY17 being 282. So it's actually a 0% increase when you compare apples to apples.
Okay, you've totally confused me.
Okay? Well, that's my
Are we
job.
not gonna be doing the same thing in fiscal year 18-19?
We're gonna be doing it in a different manner, and I don't know if, Sam, did you wanna comment on that?
I had to go back, last year was the first year we didn't have any direct cost, we had to sign, so direct cost to it. And when we got started, I put in what all the departments wanted and how much time we spent, like, I think I spent like 20% of my time on H&M. And that's the biggest, third biggest department we have. So then, they came back, the auditors came back, they talking with the manager, they said, you can't move it more than 10% of anybody, so we had to cut it all back starting July 1st of this year. And, so we're gonna have less transfer to personnel next year. Because we cannot put any personnel, we had one cost, paid personnel for 50% of the salary. I'm sure that was right, because that's what they gave me. This person, if you take care of everything in the Sportsplex, with all the summer help and all the things, she did say 50%, we can only count 10%, so we had to reshuffle this thing. So we won't really be able to settle this thing down until 18, 19. We went through a change last year and overcharged some of them, as what ATA and the comptroller said, but they pulled it back down now, we'll go through and say this works, and then they do it like this, like that. But the base thing is that we've got to charge direct costs, health costs, OJI costs, old pension costs, right to those departments, because they never had it. The general fund was carrying them for 50 years. Now they're not carrying them, they're being charged to those two programs directly. So it's making us restructure everything to get to where we finally have everything even with what ATA is accomplishing.
Okay, I
They-
understand that, but my
yeah.
question is, how are we accounting for that? Are we actually reducing the personnel expense in the general fund, or are we
No, we
doing
will
a,
not this year,
Councilman-
we will next year.
May I speak, Mayor?
Karen?
Councilman Wallace, this past year, the way that Sam set it up, we did a budget transfer. The comptroller's office would rather it be a direct expense on a monthly basis, so we'll be doing a journal entry, so it therefore will not affect the reduction in their total budget. you'll see the expense transfer to the duties and new funds.
Okay, so we won't be reducing personnel expense. There'll be a separate line item for that then?
Exactly.
Okay, that was my question. Okay, thank you.
And a good point there, Randy, is they did not, ATA and the state did not allow us to budget for that. So if anything, the budget here is a little bit soft in that whatever that amount turns out to be, it won't be 700,000 like it was, but let's say it's 300,000 or 400,000, that has not been anticipated in here.
Why are they not letting us budget for that? That's what I don't understand. If we know we've got the expenses and,
I like
They,
to tell
they,
you.
I have talked to
they
them
say
about
we
that.
charged too much and we're saying we didn't,
uh,
and we lost.
Well, and they just say that it's not generally accepted accounting principles to budget for that.
okay. I'll talk
I
to them.
took their word for it, but it will be there. Now, what you see here has changed, and that's, if everybody will go back to what I said, keep at your left hand, is the sheet that Aaron has prepared that changed some of these items here. And the ones that I want to point out is where the mayor's expense previously had shown going up 35%. And basically, Mayor, that was for your secretary who was on from a agency, coming on full-time, Ron Pennell, and just other various expenses. That has now been reduced down to a 26% increase and can be justified accordingly. The big one that I want to make sure we all recognize is information systems, and Karen can comment on this if need be, but it was showing a 32% increase. This is the one that Councilman Conger hit on immediately, and that has now been changed down to a 4% increase by the corrections that were made there. And like I said, some of these other percentages, you can't really hang your hat on because they're not apples to apples because of that transfer that we've been speaking of. So we go down to the general government area, the buildings and employee benefits and things of that nature. City Hall was showing 39% increase, and after we took out $100,000 that we had in there under building maintenance, that's now down to 9% increase. Get mixed up on the sheets here, and I know it's kind of confusing for you. Most of what you see here are going to be negative or decreases, which are positives. For example, here in general government, we reduced, let me make sure I comment on the right items here. We took out such items as I guess I don't have them earmarked here, but tax sale expense, marketing, various areas where we think we can control these type of expenses, and we brought them down accordingly. And actually, employer contributions shows a decrease because that's where our old pension plan is in, and unfortunately, we have people being deceased, et cetera, so that's coming down. But the thing that I'll say in general, and if you have questions on, it's our major uncontrollable expense, and that's healthcare claims. And basically, if you remember last year, we had to take $1.1 million out of the reserve that we had for health expense, and now it's no longer there to take from, and we actually had to increase slightly the portion that the employees bore. So it's roughly 70% borne by the city, health insurance, health claims, and 30% by the employees. We are anticipating roughly $7.2 million in claims in the FY18 budget. Last year, which I'm referring back to FY16, because FY17 is still in process. But in FY16, we got up as high as 8.1 million, and that's when we had to take $1 million out of the reserve that we had accumulated. And Stacy is here along with Keith. If you'd like to, Keith made a very good presentation to the Budget Committee, so there's 3 of you that have already heard that. Randy, if you remember, where he compared us to other cities, municipalities, counties, and we're very much in line and better off than in many other cases. Does anyone want to ask any questions? Stacy is here, and Keith also. Having heard none, I'll move on. I would like to, before we get into calling up the departments, which will be the next step, I would like to just comment roughly, because in a budget hearing, we should ask ourselves where we were last year and where we are currently. And this is for the year ended June 30th, 2016. That's where we ended, and you all received a report from Mike Hewitt and one of his people along around January or February. And I want to point out there, just because it has been a little bit confusing, sometimes I may have quoted one number and then another time another. The actual unassigned fund balance, where I've got the check mark there, is reported by ATA is 14.7 million. But that's due to the fact that by state requirements for generally accepted accounting principles and their own requirements, and ATA was forced to reserve for the $3.2 million that we budgeted in FY17 as a shortfall. So that brought us down to 14.7, when otherwise we would have been at 17.9, something of that matter. And our total fund balance is 18.7, but it will actually be a wait and see case to see how we come out on this year. Last year, being ending June 30th, FY16, calendar year 16, our net change was, our loss was only $1.1 million, but that's because of the $1 million that we were able to pull out of the reserve for health care. It really would have been something like 2.122. And Sam Dawson puts together monthly something that is very helpful to the mayor and his staff, and that's my next question would be, where are we today? Well, today you got to remember we're always 2 months behind on revenues. In other words, the sales tax revenue that we received in June was actually for April at the cash register, at the point of sale. So we are behind in our revenues, and that's why it will show something that will be overcome. But as of May, Sam is showing a $4.8 million shortfall. That will go the other way. You can see that he's got us running in various areas under budget, 3.46% overall. Now, there are some departments that are running over budget, which we also address, but some of those are very small in total expense. The main one that you would want to look at that we're running over is the stormwater ops. And that's because of all the unplanned bridge repair and pipe replacement, things that are beyond Scott's control. But we're going to probably end up with $1.5 million in stormwater operations expense. And that's why previously at one point in time, the Budget Committee had entertained a presentation on the stormwater fees that many other municipalities are having to put in place. Basically, that's where we were at the end of last fiscal year, where we are now. And unless anybody's got any questions, we need to move on to the departments. That's okay with the mayor?
Council
Al,
don't
just
have
one
any-
thing,
any-
on the 4 million, you said we were short right now. What
Right.
was your estimate it would be?
Well, in a
within-
perfect world, it'll be
within-
back down to the 3.2 million that
Okay,
we budgeted,
okay,
which
okay.
has since been reduced down to 2.9. So
Okay, okay.
if I had to
missed that
throw out a number, I'd say 3 million.
Okay, thank you.
Al, are you the person to ask the questions about general government expenditures?
Yes,
Uh,
and I can call on others.
Okay, well, a couple of questions I had is in the Office of Mayor, you did point out that they reduced the salaries, but the benefits didn't get reduced, and they were already 70% increase versus a 30% increase in salaries. I don't know whether you need to look at that or not, or whether that's, you've already
Are you
have.
talking about in the mayor's department?
Right. And that's probably nothing you can answer the question right now, but it might be something you might want to look at.
Something that we
Look at the
can make a
benefits.
note to,
Because they were, the salaries, before you made the change today, the salaries were up 30%, but the benefits were up 70%. And that could have been you had full-time versus part-time or something, but,
could have had to do with the benefits on someone working from an agency, like the mayor's secretary versus
okay,
someone on our own payroll, but we will look at that.
okay. And the other question I had is on CEDC, are they getting another employee?
CEDC, we're paying, now let's see where you're finding that.
I'm on actually the minutia pages,
Oh, you're back in the
the
text.
details.
Let's address that later when
Lori is here. Any comment, Lori, as far as the personnel for CEDC and through the Convention and Visitors Bureau?
Yes, sir, we hired an employee last year with the additional funding that we had received, as an agreement with this, cooperation with the city and county. That is a reimbursable expense to the city, so we fully reimburse that expense with payroll.
Okay, thank you.
I think we picked up their payroll to be reimbursed by the CEDC.
Yes, sir.
So we have two salaries from Convention and Visitors Bureau, which will be reimbursed to the city.
That's the other question I had was on information systems, their salary's gone up a considerable amount also.
That's one of the budget changes that you have on your change sheet. It's not
Okay.
offset
Right.
that.
that basically comes out, Randy, if you look on the $512,000
Okay,
adjustment. One other area that the council often asks about is grants and donations. And just to give everyone a look at that, basically, we have a budget of $424,000. There's not many changes. We have a undesignated $82,000, $83,000 rounded. Mainly those entities that are on there, charitable entities, I think have basically stayed the same. Does anybody have any questions relating to those? And correspondingly, that's what we call the 720 account, grants and donations. And then we have appropriations to other agencies. Basically, this one has come down about 54,000 because last year, the current year that we're in, really FY17, we funded Youth Town's expansion from an all-male facility to a new female facility that they started up, and we had a one-time contribution of 54,000. Other than that, I think we're basically about the same. But we're open to any questions. If you see something missing or something there that wasn't there before, be glad to.
I guess one
address
question, the Humane Society, since we're taking that over, are we still gonna do that donation, or how's that gonna work? $25,000 Humane Society?
I'm gonna pass to Sam there, if you could comment, Sam, on the
We're
main.
meeting with the sponsors to try to get it to the
Okay, because that may not be a done deal then, so. I withdraw my question, Mayor.
That's sort of an unknown, let's
I
say.
think I figured that out on my own.
So that's a worst-case scenario. Okay,
How are
moving
you,
right- Go ahead.
The other thing I was looking at is terminal leave. We spent $83,000 year-to-date. We're budgeting $350. Are we expecting to use a lot more of that next year?
I'm sorry, I missed what you,
On terminal leave, severance expenses? Year-to-date, we spent $83,000, but we're budgeting $350,000.
Lynn, you got a bunch of retirements coming up, haven't you?
Could be, could be. It's iffy. We have some people next year who will, retire out due to age. And then we have some others who are on the borderline, who may or may not. So we just budget, it's really hard to tell.
Okay, is that terminal leave expense, that's the expense that they built up, that when they retire, that the city owes them that money for
Yes, sir.
unpaid vacation days and those types?
Unpaid sick leave,
Okay,
over and above 600.
okay. I can understand why we want to keep that up then. One other question, Al, or
okay.
at least one for right now. On personnel expenses, their salaries have gone up about 70%.
No, personnel is one of the two accounts, or line items that I highlighted along with purchasing, where it was reduced for the transfer because a good portion of Lynn,
Okay,
well,
That's the H&S
H&S
issue.
doesn't have a personnel.
okay,
department,
okay.
so,
That's one you already,
Right.
Ms. Bell, you mind coming up and have a seat? Bring all your boxes of materials with you, if you would. She's worked with the department head, so pretty much one-on-one, so might be able to help with some questions. Council have any other questions of Al as far as the overall budget and questions about?
I have a question, if I may. Al, you may have discussed this. Could you just explain again the community services reduction of 200,000, 203,000 to 100%
It's basically
reduction?
because Monique Merriweather left the employment of the city. You correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor.
Yeah, that,
That was her salary?
yeah, Monique took another
The whole department.
position, and that's what right now, we're not planning on, due to the funding issue, replacing that position. So we've taken the two existing employees and moved them over, one to H&S, and I think one to
Housing.
housing, yeah.
I had a question on the nonprofits. Were any taken off that were on there last year?
The one that I mentioned was the 54,000 for the Youth Town.
Okay, that's the only one.
Women's Center.
Yeah.
Okay, and that was a one-time,
Yes.
okay. Thank you.
If we're ready then, Mayor, to move on to the actual operating departments. I think police is next, and I think Karen's
Let's,
going to try and keep up.
As far as the council, if you all have any, we'll be happy to have our department heads come up and answer any questions that you all have. Some of them are fairly, no growth, and you all pretty much aware of where they are on a day-to-day basis, but some of them you may have some questions, so we'll be happy to call those department heads up if you do have any questions. They-
The first area is the police department, which you can see overall actually had a 3.53% decrease in comparison to the FY17 amended budget. But there are various line items that go up and down, and that's one of our major expenses. So $20 million would probably be one that you want to have Chief Weiser make some comments on, or that's up to you. That is our major area in public safety, and then we follow up with the fire department at 13 million.
I just have one quick question. The overall total police was down, but then can you explain the difference between the police grant programs and extra duty as opposed to the total police budget?
You want to talk about extra duty?
Karen, you got the grants program pretty
Yeah.
much
Let
under,
Ken Barry sit
under
here.
your direction.
We go over our budget.
You can sit over here, Karen. Excuse me.
Ms. Bell maintains most.
I'll cover our general budget, but as far as grants and extra duty, I'll let Ms. Bell cover that.
On the grants, as he's already referenced, some of those, the reason that we segregate that out is so that you can see the true police department expenses versus the reimbursables.
Okay.
So the grants, extra duty, hospital officers, all of that's reimbursable, so
Okay.
that's why we separate that.
Okay.
Does that answer your
That answers
question?
my question, thank you.
Okay, question related to that, on the hospital officers, where's the revenue showing on that? I couldn't find the revenue on that.
Yes, it's in the police department revenues as a reimbursable. Let me reference you to that page.
If it's in there, you can get that to me later. I'll just
It
email you.
is in there. There is a line item that directly offsets the the
Okay.
expense.
And is it the exact same number or close or?
Close.
Okay. And then my other question on that reimbursement is the school resource officers. We're budgeting, no, I'm sorry, the school resource officers, what I couldn't find. The revenue for the hospital officers was $348,000, but our expense is $454,000.
That's because we're in negotiations regarding the contract, because when we put a police officer in the hospital officer expense side, that covers their benefits, their leave time, and so forth. There has been discussions with the hospital about paying just for when the officer's there, not for the leave time. So on the expense side, you see everything of that officer charged, his uniforms, his leave time, his benefits, everything. So, they're looking at a new contract for July.
Okay. When
Councilman
they're looking
Wallace.
at that contract, we need to encourage them to cover us for our whole expense and just part of it. If they want to hire a police officer, then they.
Yeah,
can reimburse us.
that's what they're renegotiating. What happened is when they started that program, it was young officers with 2 years of experience or less went out there to work. Now we're having more senior officers sign up for that detail, so their salaries are a lot more. So they're currently renegotiating that contract to get all those expenses back.
Okay, thank you. And then what I couldn't find was the school resource. Is there revenue for the school resource officers? Are we not being
You
reimbursed?
will
for
not
that?
see any revenue for FY '18.
Okay.
We only have 2 left, they're both at attorney school.
But why are we not asking for reimbursement for those from school department?
Well,
Why are we sending them over there?
Well, the reality is, those 2 officers that work over there have a good relationship with school officials over there, and sometimes it can be challenging working over there. And if we don't have personnel over there working, we would be over there anyway, because if an incident happens, there was a county officer over there, more than likely, we would have to respond. So
You think
Well, I
that
mean, we're just
reduces the
maintaining-
calls? That reduces the calls.
it reduces calls for service. It helps us build relationships with those kids in those communities. As you well know, we've had a dramatic reduction in crime and homicide shootings. So we contribute some of that to community-oriented policing, and that's, establishing relationships. So those 2 positions are very important to maintain those
Thank you.
relationships.
Yeah, I think that what we're doing at Alternative School, I'm pretty much assured drifts over into the community at large as far as helping us in reduction of crime, and that's something that we'll take a look at each and every year to see if that's worth, probably $80,000, $90,000, probably over $100,000 we're putting into those 2 officers, but we think long-term, and even short-term, that it benefits the community by having those particular officers there. And we'll know more, obviously, as we get into that program.
Chief, how long have those officers been there?
Probably about 4 or 5 years.
The same ones?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and that's, we're budgeted, $98,737 for those two positions.
For the school resource officers? Showing 206,000 on
No, we only have 2 officers assigned.
the budget's got 206. You got it by line item?
What page are you on?
I'm on page 28.
Councilman, 2006 is the FY 17
Okay,
totals.
okay, 167, I'm
FY 18 is
sorry, 167 is what I've
167,881.
got for this year.
Yeah, I'm showing on here 97,537.
Okay, I'm looking at the total school resource officers for, including benefits, which
Okay.
there could be a problem
Yeah,
with benefits,
yeah.
because the salaries is 97 and the benefits is 70. That sounds like out of kilter, too. You see what I'm looking at, Karen?
We'll follow up on it and make sure.
That definitely sounds out of kilter.
Those benefits may have included the other school resource officers in this previous year that has not been taken out yet.
Chief, I'm noticing quite a bit of cuts in your budget. How's this gonna affect the safety of our citizens of the city and deter crime with all these cuts?
Well, if you look at our budget overall, we tried to work off the FY 16 numbers, but there was a couple of things that we couldn't control, like step raises, and a tune of about 155,000. But what we did, we looked at certain line items like fuel, where we came in way under in fuel, and you'll see a reduction in fuel, but you'll see a increase in training, where it went I'm on page 19, it went up 58%. So we transferred part of that fuel money in there to cover the cost. We anticipate, we just hired 15 new recruits, and we were trying to hire 10 more in August. We were 26 officers short. But just for academy cost, to send 25 officers to the police academy, which we have those 15 scheduled to go in October, just the cost for the academy itself is $3,300, which comes out to about $82,000. So we moved some money around, and we had to do that with uniform and clothing. For us to put an officer on the street to outfit him with the vest, weapon, all his gear, it's $3,150 per officer. So at 25 officers, you're looking at $78,750. So, I mean, our budget pretty much stayed the same. We just moved some money around, and you see some significant decreases in certain areas and increases in other areas, but it's really the same money. The one thing that has been challenging this past year is we've had several retirements over the last couple of years. We've had some officers move on to federal, state agencies, and so we've been shorthanded. So we've had to adjust our shifts. Officers are now on a 12-hour shift to have more coverage out on the street. And it puts more officers out on the street, and it allows them to have a weekend off, where a new officer, it may take him 8, 9, 10 years to get a weekend off. The way this 12-hour schedule works is they get a weekend off every other weekend, so they're rotating. But we're really, we're short in areas throughout the whole police department, in every division and unit. So the reality is, we just hired 15, but it will be 9 months before they go through the training program, through the academy, before they're out on the street on their own. So we've had to be creative. We've had to make shift adjustments. We're doing a number of things to try to minimize the overtime and come in at budget this year. So we had gotten to a point where officers could not even take a day off because we didn't have enough staffing. So that's when we implemented the 12-hour shifts, and this allows more manpower on the streets, more flexibility for training, days off. So it's gonna be a relief when we get these officers, because, you know, our folks,
Well, are you better off than you were with these cuts? Are you better off now?
no, I mean, we're on, we've got what we need to operate, Mr. Cisco. We've just moved some money around. We came in we've been way under budget the last 2 years on fuel.
So you're telling me we're gonna get the same type protection and everything that we've had in the last year or two?
There's no.
What you've been chief of police?
That, what numbers are you referring to? Because I'm working off the line item sheets, and, I mean, really, we're working off the same budget. We had about a $300,000 increase, and that was contributed to about $155,000 in step raises. We absorbed the cost of about $40,000 for the North Precinct and funding the school resource officers. So, I mean, we're not losing anything. We're working off the same numbers.
That's good.
Chief, if I may, and this is kind of to, I guess, echo Councilman Cisco's concern, and I don't know if this is particularly the line item, but in patrol, it's down over $700,000, and that's the major percent of the total decrease. Does that mean that there are less people on patrol?
No,
Could you explain that?
No, okay, so we talked about the retirements over the past 3 or 4 years. All right, so a P4 officer made substantially more than an entry-level officer.
Right.
The majority of our patrol division has 5 years or less. With this bridge program and the current retirement that we're under, it doesn't pay to stay after 55. So we've had a high volume of retirements. So those positions are being replaced with entry-level officers that are, their pay, benefit, salary is substantially less than a 30-year veteran.
So boots on the ground is not changed, or
No.
there's no change in that?
No.
Okay.
And the majority of our vacancies, we do have, it would be about half in patrol and half in other divisions like CID, narcotics, gang unit. So, but, you know, crime is down and everything is good. But those positions are very vital and very important. We have to maintain that staffing level because the way we've been working this past year, you know, our employees have made a number of sacrifices and they're tired, so we need to make sure that we maintain that staffing level if we're gonna maintain the level of, you know, safety and security for our citizens.
And you say we have some in the pipeline now who are being trained, and then
We've got
we bring in
15
more.
that are scheduled to go to the academy in October. Between now and October, they'll be in the training program, and we're trying to hire additional 10 in August.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Now, when you hire these 15, will that mean we'll have more according to retirements? I mean, it won't be a net gain of 15, will it? Because some have retired?
Well, you're talking about anticipating future retirements? I think over the next 12 months, there's only 2 or 3 that will have their time be eligible to retire and that are looking at retirement. So,
So these would be net gains primarily?
yeah, with these 15 and we can hire 10 more, we'll be in good shape.
Okay.
And we're always going to be short. Ideally, we want to be, you know, 5 or 6 short. We don't want to be 26 or 27 short.
But this will be more than we've had in a long time, if we hire these 15 and then 10?
We've already hired them. They're on the street.
Okay.
Well, I mean, they're in the training program. We
The
were
15 make more than we've had in a long time?
We were 26 short, we hired 15, so that puts us,
Okay.
you know, at 11 short. But they're really not beneficial to us till they complete all their
That's
training and
right.
go through the academy. So, between, now and the next 6 to 9 months, we're still going to be working in the current state that we are.
Okay.
There are more officers on the street under this new shift, than there were, when we worked the other shifts. So, I mean, currently, we do have more officers on the street.
Okay.
I do want to commend you on the fantastic job you've done on overtime salaries. I know in previous years that ate up a big hunk of our budget, and I just want to let you know I appreciate the work you've done on that and continue along with it.
Well, we work hard, all the all the administration works hard, and, I mean, we're very conscious. We understand that we have the biggest budget, one of the biggest budgets in the city, so we're very conscious, and we try to work on it weekly to maintain that. But at the end of the day, approximately 80% of what we have budgeted is in salaries. So when you come and say you have to cut $500,000, I don't have anywhere to cut $500,000 other than in salaries, because the other 18 to 20% of the budget, we have to have that to operate, to function, to pay everything that we need as far as computer services, contracts, buildings, and those type things. So, we're trying to be very responsible to stay within and maintain the current budget that we have. I made a conscious effort not to come to the council this year to ask for any money. Whatever budget amendments that we came with, we pay for out of equitable sharing or, the drug fund. Well, that's one luxury we do have. We do have those to kind of rely on. So, it's the whole department. I mean, just real quick, when we hire a police officer now, when I came as a police officer, all I want to do is arrest people and fight crime. So in our recruit program, we have to look at things differently now. It's not just about arresting people. It's about what impact can you have on your community. We have to look at it from a business standpoint, that crime affects our community. And if we have high crime, it affects our tax base, it affects our salaries, it affects our equipment, and it affects the whole city. So we are talking to our young officers about looking outside the scope of a regular police officer, so looking at community-oriented policing, look at it from a business standpoint. When I come to work, what can I do to have a positive impact on our community? The lady sitting behind the desk entering reports or whatever, what can we do? So we're trying to change that mindset and make everybody responsible for the budget, make everybody responsible to have an impact on crime. So, it takes time, but I feel like we'll get there, and we're making some progress.
Okay. Jay?
If I could, I know it's not about the budget, but I want to commend you and your staff for the great community relationship that you have with our community now. It's a very great relationship that we're building in our community, and I think it's happening a lot with our crime issues that we're having. So I'll just let you also know that we're commending for the hard work they're doing.
Absolutely. Any other questions of council of Chief or Deputy Chief? Okay, thanks, guys.
All right.
While
Yes,
they're
sir.
here, Mr. Chairman, can we get the Capitol?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, why not?
I
Thank
would, just for update, all the body cameras are implemented, have been for several months. So the body camera program that we implemented last year is in full force.
Chief, I know when we had discussed the body cameras before, I believe the computer hardware and how
Right.
that information was going to be collected was not an issue, but up for discussion. Can you give us an idea of where we are on all of that?
Well, when we initially started with the body cameras, we started a pilot program. We only implemented 15 to 20 body cameras to see how much data storage it was going to take, how we were going to manage that. But it's been fully implemented. We have enough data storage. We've got some IT guys that work with Karen's folks. They do a great job, so we're good to go.
Does every patrolman have a body camera?
Yes. If everything's up and working, they should have a body camera on. At a minimum, there's a body camera in every district. There may be some patrol supervisors that don't have body cameras on, but the officers do. All right.
Officers on the street do?
Yes, sir. Councilman Buchanan, you want to talk about Capitol?
Yes.
Anything in particular?
No, I just want you to go over it, but someone had put, and you just requested 10 vehicles. You and I talking, it's got 47 in there printed.
Yeah, so on page 2 of Capitol, you look at support services, there's 4,000, about almost 500,000 budgeted for vehicles, and in parentheses, it says 47 vehicles. I talked to Ms. Bell about that. That's a typo. Just to kind of give you an overview, police sedan that we purchased off the lot is about $27,000. By the time we put video cameras in it, front and back, computers, all the police equipment, sirens, blue lights, the striping, prisoner transport cage, that would get you up to about $47,000 for a new police cruiser. So that's going to average out to about 10 vehicles. Now, what we've done, we don't have enough vehicles to assign to every officer in the department, but we're assigning one vehicle to 2 officers. So they take care of it a little better. You know, there's an officer on day shift and an officer on night shift that have the same vehicle. So, you know, anything that you kind of have to yourself, that you have it every day, you're going to take a little better care of it. And so, yeah, that works out to about 10 vehicles. So Ms. Bell said she would have that corrected before the second reading.
On the second reading, you'll have some money coming back from them anyway on the vehicles, so that number will increase because they have some money allocated this year. They're not going to be able to get the vehicles in before June 30.
The insurance recovery money that came before y'all a couple months ago were to buy vehicles. The vehicles are currently not through in production, so we can't pay for them and invoice them, so we're going to have to roll it over. So you should see additional $170,000 to $180,000 under support services.
Thank you.
Okay. Council, you're good on capital? Okay, thank you,
They
guys.
also-
Yes.
If there are any questions on the Metro or drug fund, they handle both of those. Metro Narcotics, they're at the back. They're very simple, straightforward, but while they're here, if there are any.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Thank you. And I think we have fire next.
Fire, yes.
If council has any questions, the budget of the fire department would be, Chief Stewart is here along with some of his administration staff.
Are you, don't take a break in a few minutes?
Yeah, let's get through the fire department. Let's get through the fire department. Let's get through the fire department. Good morning, guys. Good morning.
with me, he's over training. I have, Lamar, who's over, fire prevention, and also have Rico, who's over, bed. Y'all have any
Gotcha.
questions?
Okay, council, you have any questions of the budget on the fire department? Any,
I
yeah,
do on
go
the
ahead.
capital outlay, if we're ready to jump to that.
Let's take, okay, let's finish up the operating, Ray, if you don't mind, and let's just see if there's anything. Chief, anything y'all want to add as far as your operating budget for this year?
We may, at this time, we don't, but we may come back.
Okay. I think I had one element kind of left out, and that was the Survive.
Survive Alive House.
Survive Alive House, and I don't think we have an operating.
No, we do
got
not, and
left
Chief
out.
and I have talked about that it's probably
Okay.
good to break that out, but we'll work on that at a future date.
Okay, that'll be fine. We'll watch your revenue and try not to let that go too long, Chief, until you get some funding because that's been overwhelming success for our schools and our young people to go through that model. We appreciate what y'all have done.
So one question on operating, do you feel like you're fully staffed at each one of your stations currently?
It changes. We've had some people retire, got some mandatory retirement coming. We've had some, we've lost some because they have not been able to pass certification tests. And we do have overtime. But all in all, we're in pretty good shape. I think in time to come, if we keep making the volume of EMS calls, we're gonna have to increase personnel. see how we can.
Okay. How about calls you're making for false calls, or however you want to phrase them, but
That's
false alarms, are they up, down considerably?
about the same.
Okay.
That's the nature of the
Is that
beast.
still taking a lot of the fire department's time?
Oh, it's, yeah, and it always will.
Okay.
Can't stop it.
Yeah. Has the fines that we attempted to, have they done any good on that, or
Didn't work, did it?
did we?
No,
We did
that
away with
that
it.
doesn't,
Didn't work.
been productive at all. I'm not for sure if any municipality in the country has been very productive on trying to decrease the number and the volume of false alarms, either through law enforcement or fire. It's just the nature of the beast, and we have to answer every call. You know, we don't let any of them, we don't anticipate them being a false call. We anticipate them being a live call.
I will say our fire marshals are here, but I'll speak for them from sitting up here. They are very active and proactive on false alarms. So especially malicious false alarms, someone pulls fire stations, or the repetitive false alarms, they very quickly respond and send investigators, inspectors out to those sites and work to help resolve those issues, to help keep those numbers down.
So they're working with those locations and trying to resolve those false alarms.
So if we get
Okay.
the same false alarm from particularly
Correct.
industry
For
that you're
example,
trying to work with to
if a
get their
hotel has a false
system
alarm
fixed.
about 2 or 3 times in a row, they'll send someone out to find out what the issue is.
Yeah.
And try to push on, get it fixed, and enforce code the best they can to, they've been very proactive on codes.
Randy, the only area, Maxi's done a great job in almost all his areas. The only area that actually sticks out with an increase is training. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
That's the survival live's been commingled in some of that, so that's increased some areas for him.
Okay, so that's blended in with the training budget, okay.
We also hired a new instructor to my staff after the budget was done last year.
Okay.
So that was not calculated into our
Okay.
salary line.
Okay. Okay, any other questions from council on their operation budget?
So in this operation budget for salaries, is this planning for a static employment, no increase in personnel, or firefighters, any plans to increase those?
Only as needed.
Okay, let's go to the Capitol then and see if the council has any questions, or chief has any comments on their Capitol.
I guess my only question was the capital, the budget, is that fire department operations, is that any new vehicles, or is that all just,
As far as on the capital side,
yes, sir,
no new trucks.
no new trucks, okay.
Now, we're getting a new battalion chief truck, but we're not getting,
No new fire trucks.
fire trucks.
We're standing fairly decent currently on a fire truck?
No, I'd love to
Oh,
buy.
what's our average age on
The
our
fire
fire
department would
trucks?
like to have about 8 of them, if you'd like. to-
What's the average age on our fire trucks, or you got a kind of age history, or?
We've got, which we sent in that 5-year plan, we've got several trucks with over probably 120,000 miles on them and 10 years of age, several. And thanks to Rodney and his group, he's keeping them on the road, but the time will come when new ones will have to be bought.
So you've got a 5-year plan for replacing those?
The ones we sent in to you, or to your committee.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And about how many trucks do we have per station?
Excuse me?
About how many trucks do we have per station?
13 apparatus, is that correct?
How many per station?
It varies.
Varies.
All of them have at least one?
Yes, we have 2 at Station 4 out south, 3 downtown, plus our
Okay.
hazmat equipment.
Okay.
Have a truck, ladder truck, and a pumper at Station 2 by the hospital.
And all those
Station
are
3 is a
functioning?
single company, just 1 apparatus. Station 6 is 1 apparatus. 3 at 5, which is on Van Drive, and then a tanker is only manned by 2 people, and a pumper at Station 7.
Okay. And along with your maintenance, I know some fire stations look a little better than others. Some maybe need a little tender loving care, a little painting and that sort of thing. One of them in particular is the one out south. So I'm hoping that maybe this year they want a little painting done inside and things like that, so
Be nice.
if you could look into that, that shouldn't cost very much to paint a room or two. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions of council, fire department? Okay, thank you very much, guys. We appreciate it. And the chair is going to declare about a 15-minute recess.
Comfort break. Comfort break.
We will come back in here at, about 17 minutes till.
You say 10 o'clock?
Thank you, Ken, so.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes, sir. Man,